Let's start with protein powder, protein shakes, building muscle overnight and stuff like that. Also, if you want to build as much muscle as possible, you need to use protein powder literally within that anabolic window, 1 hour after the workout or something like that. How much of that is true, and does timing and quality of the protein powder really matters?
Well, I think none of it's true in regards to building it overnight, right? Because muscle's not built overnight, fat's not lost overnight, and the fact that we just don't acutely accomplish those things. And
Mm,
from the muscle building standpoint, I spent a lot of time in the NFL and college sports and whatever, NBA as a dietitian and working with athletes. And so it's things you measure over the course of time. Obviously, protein's a very critical part of the muscle building process. I think in some cases, like in the youth athlete space, it's just over, it's something that they put way too much emphasis on trying to consume way too much protein. And I
mm,
think people are misinformed that they have to consume large volumes of this to be successful. And building muscle, it requires a variety of things, right? It's like you have to have the correct training load, the frequency of the training load. Obviously, nutrition plays a big role, but you also have to have adequate calories first. It's not just about
mm,
protein. I've seen athletes that don't eat enough calories. They probably eat enough protein. They might be 150 pounds and they get 150 grams of protein, but they might be only consuming 1,800 calories and they need 3,000. So it really just depends on so many different factors: adequate calories, adequate training load, adequate sleep. All those things factor into what's going to build muscle. But protein's a critical part of that. You can't really build muscle if you're not eating adequate protein and enough of it. From a powdered standpoint, it's just a convenient way to get protein. And one of the
mm,
struggles, as you know, and I've seen in practicing for a long time, is people are not typically consuming enough throughout the day, or they're backloading this. And in some cases, that it's the nutrient that they're probably consuming the least amount of, except for those that are maybe trying to eliminate carbs completely if they're doing a keto or low carbohydrate diet. So from a powdered standpoint though, and it's a convenient way. I made a smoothie this morning for breakfast. It was like one of those things where you get sick of sometimes eating eggs or whatever it is that is protein rich. And I was like, let's make a smoothie. My daughter and I will make it once a week, and it's great post workout too, if that's what you want to do. But I like eating food. I mean, that's one of the things
yeah.
personally. I love to eat food. Whereas if I'm on the go and I'm like going to get in my car and drive for an hour or two, and I just lifted weights, and it's going to be a while before I sit down and eat a meal, sure, I'll grab a ready to drink from
Yes,
the
yes.
gym, or maybe grab a banana to go with it, get some carbs or something, whatever's available, to where I'm not waiting 2 or 3 hours to eat.
100% agree with that. I think just like practicality and efficiency is probably the two main reasons why I recommend it to most of my clients. Also, for people who, for any number of reasons, cannot get enough protein through food, I think protein powder in any sort of form is like a winner. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. However, the only negative aspect of it, potentially negative aspect of it, is I think is over reliance on protein powder to get just enough protein intake or to hit that daily protein threshold, right? For whatever reason that is. I think that pretty much applies to Gen Pop and athletes as well. I'm thinking from the perspective of that protein powder equals pretty much something that's like a shortcut to either muscle protein synthesis or just kind of getting jacked. If you just eat a ton of protein powder, that's going to have a better effect than just regular food, right? And we kind of know that that's not true. However, sometimes I'll do that as well. Like I'm going to have 3 out of my 4 meals in a day, it's going to be protein powder based, just because either I don't have enough time, I messed up my scheduling, or any number of reasons. Do you think that like prioritizing food just from a standpoint of more nutrient variety and a more like wholesome, nutritious like profile of food, that it's better to just kind of try to get protein out of like whole food sources, for example, than to all rely on protein powder?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on the purpose. For someone trying to lose weight, I think one of the things they struggle with the most is controlling hunger. And
Hmm.
when we look at hunger control, obviously solid protein sources are going to have they're going to provide an advantage over liquid. At least I personally find that with myself. If I have a smoothie, I'm hungry within 2 hours. Liquid's going to digest quickly. You know, those hunger hormones, ghrelin, leptin, that control hunger and fullness, are probably, what we've seen. And sometimes in the literature is liquid calories cause them to elevate and spike and crash pretty quickly. But when you look at solid food, that's going to take much longer to break down and digest. So if I'm having my favorite breakfast is 2 eggs, 3 eggs with some egg whites, lean ham, lean turkey, 2 slices of whole grain bread, like Dave's Killer, I am sustained for 4 to 5 hours. And obviously that's
Mm,
taking a lot longer to break down. So, again, it goes back to the schedule. If that person going, I'm really busy right now, I have a long day, I have no time to eat, because you hear that a lot. Well, then grab a shake, grab a bar, grab something to get protein in your system versus I don't have time for this. Well, at some point, like you mentioned, you rely on that for convenience. You don't want to look at a food log every day and see, oh, they had 3 nutrition bars and a protein shake, and that's 5 out of their 7 days a week. I mean, yes, that's good, but at some point, you want to get some solid food, because many of these products don't really have any added nutritional value. I mean, beef's going to have zinc and iron and some other nutrients, B vitamins, some of these other animal-based proteins. If you eat animal-based proteins, will have other nutrients as well that we don't get from
mhm.
protein powder. And some of the protein powders are fortified with multivitamins and minerals inside of that as well. But yeah, I mean, I don't think we want to rely on it every day. And maybe one meal or snack is fine. I love to have a protein bar as kind of like my candy, like that sweet tooth. I
Yeah.
want to have something like with
Hmm.
a chocolate flavor on it. So that's kinda what I
Yeah.
use
Yeah.
protein bars for. I'm like, "That's my dessert."
Of course. There are a lot of general misconceptions about protein powders. Have you noticed any difference in not necessarily just nutrient profile, but how different protein powder sources react differently on people's gut health, just general, like potentially they might have certain like digestion issues and stuff like that. I'm not trying to put words into your mouth, but I will say that for a lot of my clients who are having issues with acne or any sort of gut issues with whey protein, I either try to recommend isolate. So I have a two-part question for you. Number one, is there any difference between isolate and concentrate when it comes to like general digestibility and how body absorbs it? And also, what do you think about using something like beef protein powder as an alternative to like whey protein?
Yeah, I mean, from a digestibility standpoint, bioavailability standpoint, how much it increases blood amino acids, right? Because when you consume protein powder, no different than if you consume carbs, carbs increase blood glucose, protein powders or protein increase amino acids in the blood, and your blood levels go up either fast or slow. Now, how it affects the gut really depends on the person. I actually had a client recently that is very plant based for the most part, outside of some dairy products based on her culture and history, primarily vegetarian for the most part, but would try some whey. And because one of the things that I noticed in her food logs were the protein was way too low, needed 100 grams, 120 grams, was consuming 50. So once she started like a what I think is a really good whey isolate, she started breaking out with acne. When in other cases, not many people typically have that response. So everything's really individualized to that person. But I think from a bioavailability, a retention in the muscle, and increasing amino acids, the two best forms that are going to probably have the best effect are going to be a nice high quality whey isolate or a hydrolyzed, whey isolate as well. That's going to increase blood amino acids probably the most effectively. Concentrates or blends, obviously they're not as high on the quality. They're less expensive as a raw material, and that's why some brands like to choose that, is because they want better profit margins. As we talk about fish oil, I'm going to talk about different forms of oil, and why some
Yep.
brands select the least expensive version, and the consumer doesn't know that. But most people are just going to the store and looking at protein powder, going $30 a tub, $50 a tub. I'm gonna take the $20 because it's probably the same thing.
I tend to recommend something like beef protein powder primarily to clients who have gut issues. And for me personally, I honestly could not believe the difference that beef protein powder had on me, or at least omission of whey protein powder from my diet. I had issues with literally like cystic acne, and it was a serious problem. So I spoke with Lee Peel. I think you know who Lee Peel is. She was my coach for a while, and she literally told me like, just try to get it out of your diet. Let's prioritize whole food sources, and it just worked wonders for me. Obviously, that's just an anecdote, and I'm not basing my advice for my clients on just specifically like n equals one type of a thing. But yeah, I think having options and having alternatives. This is not like mid 90s where we used to have just one source of whey protein powder. Now we have options. What about like other options? What about like I know there are some hemp protein powders. I know there are some like vegan choices. I know also there are egg protein powders. Are there any other that you recommend? And if you do recommend them, like where do you base that recommendation off?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you mentioned hemp, and I'm just hiding the brand because I don't endorse this. I didn't buy this, but my wife bought like this hemp protein powder. I don't know why. Nothing wrong with hemp protein, but I was making something for lunch and it was avocado, and I just wanted avocado. So I'm like a guacamole with these avocado chips. And I was like, I need protein. So I put 2 scoops. Man, it just made it awful. But at least it was like just but I got 30 grams of protein. I was like, I was just trying something different. I was, just short on time.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Really, I think where you try those alternatives are in individuals that are struggling, like if they're I can't metabolize dairy or not metabolize it, but just it causes GI issues or they break out with acne. Well, then we look at other sources. We look at pea protein, we look at hemp protein, we look at plant-based sources. Maybe it's beef protein if they, want to look at. I've personally not tried beef protein. You have me kind of intrigued now to say, let me buy some product that has beef and just see how that feels. If it feels any differently, I don't know if it's going to make a difference, but especially in someone like myself that probably is not training like an elite athlete or a high performance athlete where beef versus whey. But again, I don't know if it's going to be drastic, but like you said, acne, there's certain reasons why people need to find alternative sources. And from a medical standpoint, that's going to make a lot of sense. If it's an allergy, a sensitivity, or they just like, this is really not agreeing. GI is a big issue. I think that's the number one issue of
Hmm.
why people are looking for alternative sources. And at the end of the day, it all works. I mean, as long as you're getting adequate protein, I think people get so obsessed with, oh my gosh, it's not whey or it's not this or it's like that doesn't really matter that much. I mean, if you're getting that specific with your diet, you probably have some issues outside of things that you're way obsessed with this process way too much, or you're competing in a show, which, obviously we
Yeah,
know
yeah.
with bodybuilding and things like that, that could be year-round eating disorder with just the mindset based on some of the things I've seen. But, it doesn't have to be that specific. So yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned just a moment ago, you mentioned protein bars, right? And you kind of use them similar to myself as kind of like a snack, or when I'm trying to diet down specifically, if I'm going to take certain foods away from my regular diet, such as like sweets and Nutella specifically. I would substitute that with like protein bars. What is the main source for like most protein bars? Am I wrong to conclude that it mostly is protein concentrate, whey protein concentrate, or are there any other sources when it comes to like protein bars?
Yeah, I mean, concentrate's probably the most commonly used by a lot of brands because it's less expensive as a raw material. Brands that I think are much higher quality overall from a raw ingredient sourcing standpoint and want to use a good menu of services for their protein, especially those that work with collegiate professional Olympic organizations. They're using mostly isolates. I mean, that's what I see. But you look at some of these companies that have multiple SKUs. They might have a pure whey, 100% pure whey isolate. They might have a blend. They have a casein. They might have a plant based. I mean, there's a lot of brands out there that offer you a pretty wide variety of services where some might just have one option depending on what they're offering as a brand. But yeah, I think it's a good blend of isolates and concentrates in many cases.
Hmm.
Some have blends, but I think when a company's starting out and they just want to they want to have an affordable product where they don't have a large investment, they're going to go with concentrate first.
This
Yeah.
might sound like a totally weird question, but do you have any clue, dude, why protein bars all of a sudden, and when I say all of a sudden, I mean in the last like 5 years, why they taste so much better than they used to like a decade ago? Because if you do remember, like a decade ago, every single protein bar tasted like sand and it tasted like chewing away concentrate powder. Like, do you know what I mean? Maybe this is a fun question to explore. Do you have any idea why this huge, massive shift where there are certain protein bars that literally taste like the real deal? So, like Snickers protein bars, Mars protein bars, a lot of those, they are a very fine replica of the original bar, like an original chocolate bar.
Now, is this mostly in Europe or have you tasted some of the powders and brands from the States?
I have not had a chance to taste any sort of brands from the States. But like throughout Europe and the UK, I've tasted quite a few different
Well,
brands
and
and
what
different
I've heard
flavors.
too In what I've heard too, Darko, is a lot of, people, Europeans, people in the UK, they like probably not as sweet options. And I don't know if that's true, but they prefer
Hmm.
probably some of the things. They come here in the States and they go, wow, that's incredibly sweet. That's too sweet for
Yeah.
my profile, my taste buds. Whereas a lot of Americans go to Europe and they go, wow, this isn't sweet enough. So, I mean, I've been consuming protein. It's probably why we have so many morbidly obese people in the US, because we want everything to taste like candy and junk food. At least that's because, we've been fed that stuff for so long in our food supply. But no, I mean, protein powder here in the States have tasted pretty good for a long time. I think when protein bars started to slowly integrate into the market, those things are like chalk. There were some protein powders for a while, like, oh, that's just awful. But for many, probably I'd say for the last, I'm almost 50. So for the last probably 30 years, there's been some pretty good protein powder tasting products. Like EAS was one of the first sports nutrition companies, you know, um,
Mm.
other brands that have been around a little bit longer, but maybe Twin Lab. I don't remember their protein powder. That was one of the old school bodybuilding brands that was out many years ago. But yeah, I mean, I think what we have now is just access to better contract manufacturers, better raw material suppliers. Like Glambia is an organization that does a lot of the raw materials for proteins. New Zealand is where we get a lot of high quality hydrolyzed and grass fed protein. There's a lot of grass fed options now. So the manufacturers now have a lot more understanding of how to make these things taste really good. And we're able to now formulate them without a lot of artificial ingredients. I mean, in some cases, there's like I use a brand that has 6 ingredients and it's sweetened with stevia, which makes it
Hmm.
taste fantastic. I mean, it tastes like a chocolate milkshake, when I'm done making it, which I'm like, great, this is awesome. I love that flavor. But in other cases, like you said, there are brands out there that's like this product I tasted today. I was like, oh, it's unflavored though, so it's a completely unflavored product, so that's why it's not very good.
Gotcha. I think yeah, we do tend to gravitate like if it tastes too sweet, it's not from this fear that it might have a lot of sugar. It's just if it's super sweet, it tastes almost like artificial, if you know what I mean. But that, like you said, this might be also like a cultural thing as well. One thing to ask you before we switch on to talk about creatine, is there any difference in how you approach protein powder recommendations? And we can include protein bars as well in your work with athletes versus Gen Pop?
Yeah, I mean, with athletes, it's more about timing. It's depending on the athlete type too, right? So I like personally working with young athletes because there's so much to fix with their diet. Many of
Hmm.
them, depending on the schools where they attend, they have access to a lot of the ready to drink products that are just more 20 to 30, 40, sometimes 40 grams of protein after workout. But a lot of those young kids, they're training early in the morning. So they'll go to school at 5:30, 6 o'clock, lift with whatever sport. Then they have to go to class. They have about 10 or 15 minutes to shower, get dressed, and go to class. So I'm having them, hey, bring a peanut butter and jelly, bring a sandwich, grab that ready to drink, and get some calories in you after that workout versus going to class empty handed. So in the athlete population, timing is a pretty big importance depending on their schedule. In the Gen Pop population, it's not nearly as important because most of the Gen Pop, they're not training for 2 or 3 hours a day. Like the young athlete or the college or pro athlete, they're putting in 45 minutes to an hour. So the timing is less important. Like it's not really about when as much as it is, are you getting enough? If you get it after, great. If you want to wait an hour,
Hmm.
that's not that big of a deal unless you're really training, for a hard 90 to 100, 120 minutes of just you know, full high intensity training at a high level and high volume.
Yep, that makes sense. So, like, your answer would pretty much be quite similar, maybe literally the same, if I asked you about generally nutrient timing when it comes to differences between athletes and Gen Pop. I think just the timing for athletes can be crucial, whereas I believe that timing for Gen Pop has been overblown a lot of times, probably for the sake of like marketing purposes. One of the ways to market protein powders, it was like, since I remember, was actual nutrient timing. And I do agree
Yeah.
with you that for like most general population, it really doesn't matter that much. So I don't know, have you noticed lately in the last maybe like a couple of years, there's been this massive push of creatine on social media, that to kind of like, we always thought, when I say we always thought, even when I was going through my personal training certifications and academies under Dr. Eric Helms and Dr. Mike Zordos, even then, whenever we talked about creatine recommendations, it was always this kind of like a very general 5 grams per day, maybe 3 to 5 grams per day recommended dose of creatine. But lately, in the last couple of years, I don't know how like do you have your pulse on like social media and what's happening on social media when it comes to especially like marketing and all these like goddamn myths. However, there is this huge push of recommending dosages even above 20 grams of protein, 20 grams of creatine per day. Most people who recommended 5 grams, they say that the recommendation should be based on individuals' weight and not just like a general, like a recommendation of dosage, right? However, is there anything to that theory of, and I'm not sure, is this theory backed by science, that if we take, let's say, like 20 grams of creatine per day, that there we are going to benefit, like we are going to have a lot of benefits for our cognitive health, for our memory, brain health, and stuff like that. Is there any truth to that? And have you used it in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm not up to date on all the science just because with my day to day and full time job, I don't have a lot of time to read studies anymore. But we've had some of the experts in the creatine space, Dr. Rick Kreider, Scott Forbes, present at some of the symposiums we've had. And and you look at some of that data. I mean, obviously, a lot of the data has shifted because creatine was once thought of as the muscle building supplement, right? The one nutrient you take for strength. Well, now we have 80 plus 70, 80 plus thousand studies that probably 90% of those studies don't even look at athletes. They look at clinical populations. We use creatine along with some other nutrients to treat athletes with concussion. Obviously, cognitive health, brain health is a really big area of research right now. I don't know if there's a specific number that we should all, right? Like you said, body weight is a big factor into that. Some of the research I've seen is zero point 0.1 to zero point 0.3 grams per kg. Now, for some
Hmm.
people, that could mean 5 grams. And for others, if it's a 120 kg athlete, that might mean they need to take 30 grams of creatine a day. And I don't
Yep.
know if we've had long-term studies because obviously the question everyone's going to say is, "Oh, it's creatine's damage to the kidneys." Well, we know that based on some of the studies done by Kreider and others, like 5-year studies, show no impact on creatine supplementation at about a 5-gram dose per day for 5 years, no impact on kidney liver function. Now, that's in healthy individuals. That's not someone who has renal
Hmm.
failure, kidney disease, etc. Um, that's it. Creatine's been pretty well studied in kids. I give my daughter, she's 14 years old, but she's almost 6 foot, plays volleyball, and I give her creatine from time to time. It's not something I'm really worried about because I'd rather see her take creatine than eat a fast food meal or eat, processed foods on a regular basis like a lot of these kids do. So I still think creatine is one of the probably top 5 most versatile nutrients that we should all be using on a daily basis for us that are older, cognitive health, longevity, potentially muscle preservation, trying to not prevent, but mitigate sarcopenia with combining lifting weights and adequate protein. In the high performance, it's a post thing. It's a recovery more than it is. I'm not a pre workout creatine person. I'm more like break the creatine down in the workout. Let's restore it with 5 or 10 grams, depending on the size of that individual.
Yeah. So let me just piggyback on that. Are there any benefits of timing of creatine? Is it important to take creatine at certain part of the day? Are we going to get better ATP production if we take it prior to our training session, or are we going to recover better if we take it after the training session? Or does taking it regularly on a daily basis is the only thing that matters?
Well, from a workout perspective, I think post makes the most sense. I mean, you can do pre and post.
Hmm.
I don't know if there's been like studies done going post, pre and post, and looking at probably 12 weeks of markers of things like strength, recovery, muscle damage, muscle soreness. I haven't looked to see if those things have been done. There's been pre and post studies done, and some of the studies have
Hmm.
shown post workout seems to be the most effective and most beneficial way to take creatine, right? You can say it's like protein, right? Taking protein pre, will it mitigate some of the muscle breakdown that occurs during the workout? I would say, yeah. I mean, taking creatine pre will probably break some of the ATP down or inhibit the breakdown of it, but also it's not going to
Hmm.
fully prevent the breakdown. Whereas taking it post is going to restore some of the breakdown that's going to happen. So, I mean, I think post workout, your three most effective things to do is obviously creatine, protein, carbohydrate. Carbohydrate is going to get creatine to the muscle faster, especially fast acting, high glycemic carbs. It's also going to get protein to the muscle faster. So, I mean, if you really, now again, that's not for the general pop that's going to go do a 45-minute workout. There's no need to like try to, I need a massive post workout nutrition program. Whereas if you
Yeah.
just put in a 90 to 120-minute really hard training session athlete, then yes, those calories, those nutrients really make a big difference and can increase that anabolic response.
So you mentioned your daughter just a couple of minutes ago. I find it with I a lot of my female clients that they're kind of afraid of using creatine because on one hand they know that the scale is going to shoot up, but at the same time I think there's this general misconception, especially with Gen Pop, like female clients that we work with, is that they kind of avoid creatine because they feel that they're going to get like bulky. So can you give us some sort of an idea of how does it actually support, female health and also female athletes without these effects that most of at least most of my female clients are afraid of?
Yeah, I haven't read a lot of the research on the female athlete versus the male athlete in regards to
Hmm.
just hormone health. But what we do notice and what I've heard from a few other professionals in the space is female athletes may benefit from creatine more so than just male athletes. I don't know the exact answer why, but female athletes should be taking creatine. A couple of reasons. I can understand the concern, right? Because if you're in a weight controlled sport, that's something that we have to be cautious, right? Wrestling, MMA, maybe cheerleading. That's not really a weight controlled sport in regards to you have to perform at a certain weight, or boxing. Whereas those sports you have to weigh a certain weight class, and that's where those athletes can still benefit from creatine. But if you have to weigh in, and you might not want to be like loading and taking a good amount of creatine because it does increase water intake. It does increase cell volume. It does increase water retention in the cell and holds more water in the cell, which is why you might see a few pounds of an increase over the course, especially initially. If you go from not taking anything to taking creatine and loading, that's going to happen. But it's no different than if you all of a sudden increase your carbohydrate intake by 100 grams. That's also going to happen. So
Exactly.
that's why you work with a trained professional that can help you understand how do we develop a customized plan to time all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, from the bulkiness, it just depends on what that individual wants to accomplish. I mean, long term, if the goal is lean and strong, creatine should probably be part of that program because it's going to help increase strength. Smaller doses is probably what you want to focus on. And that's what in the female population, my daughter, I give her about 3 grams, sometimes 5 grams, depending on if she went really hard that day and did a workout at school with the strength coach and on top of her club volleyball team. Like if she's putting in 2 hours, I'm going to probably give her 5 grams that day because she exhausted a lot more ATP and muscle creatine stores than a 45-minute workout.
Yeah, yeah, and it's really awesome to hear you talk about creatine. Like you're not jumping to any conclusions. You are very scientific with how you respond to my questions here because I think that is a complete contrast into like what trendy thing to do on social media, especially today, is, which is make these wild statements that are not based in science. However, they come from this Dunning-Kruger effect sort of a position where people who are good public speakers are going to say stuff like, creatine monohydrate in powder form is outdated. It's going to cause a lot of gut issues, and it's not made for women. It's made for male bodybuilders, and therefore you should like only use my, creatine gummies, which again are creatine monohydrate, if I'm not mistaken, right? So like, um, have you noticed any actual evidence, viable evidence, when it comes to any sort of specifically specific benefits of creatine use towards women versus men?
Don't know that answer. Just to be completely transparent, I can't sit here and cite the research on that just because I haven't really read and looked into the deep. I think people like Dr. Scott Forbes, Rick Kreider, Darren Kandal, those are individuals that have done a lot of research in this space. Probably Abby Smith Ryan.
Hmm.
Those are just incredible research scientists that have studied. And Abby Smith has done a lot of work in female athletes. If there's one person I would say, that would understand the female reproductive system, the benefits of creatine. She would be that expert. She's PhD, University of North Carolina, has done a lot of work. I think she oversees their exercise and sports nutrition lab. Just a brilliant scientist, and that does a lot of research in female athletes.
As soon as I get this podcast to where I'm ambitiously seeing it go, I'm hopefully going to get her on the podcast as well.
But Darko,
Thank you for like, yeah,
all I
go
will
ahead.
say is I don't think females should be concerned about using creatine. You should not have any worry at all. You should be more concerned about the food you're eating. And, if you're eating highly processed diet, that's
Hmm.
causing probably more long-term effects in a small dose of creatine. So if the goal is, hey, I need to get stronger, I need to recover faster, creatine should be part of that protocol.
Yeah, yeah, I 100% agree. And I think both you and I can agree. And again, not putting words into your mouth, but I think we can both agree that creatine monohydrate is still the most recommended form of creatine, right? Is there any benefit to any other form of creatine?
Yeah, monohydrate, and usually what you want to look for on the brand, Creapure is the best raw material. It's manufactured at Alzchem. It's a manufacturing facility out of Germany. They have made some of
Hmm.
the purest monohydrate. That's what most supplement companies want to get into their product if they can get it. A lot of times it's hard to get because it's highly manufactured, it's highly sought out. A lot of your top supplement brands in the industry want to put Creapure. That's not the supplement brand name. That's the actual raw material. So with any
Yeah.
raw material, they have trademark names for those raw materials, and Creapure has been the gold standard, and it's what's
Mhm.
been used in a lot of the research studies.
Yeah. So for our general audience, what is the main difference between Creapure labeled creatine monohydrate versus any other?
Just the manufacturing process. I mean, going through the manufacturing process to make sure your bioavailability and increasing muscle creatine is going to be the most effective way. I mean, it's the most well studied, which what we've learned is it has the best effect at increasing muscle creatine stores and in brain creatine stores. Just like I'll talk about omega 3 if we have time on certain forms of omega 3, increase blood omega 3 levels better than other
Hmm.
forms. So, yeah, from a research perspective, the Crea Pure. Now, that doesn't mean like micronized creatine monohydrate is not going to work. If you have a brand that doesn't use Creapure and it's creatine monohydrate, it's still going to be very effective.
So I would just like to cover something we mentioned before this call. We mentioned BCAs and how it just seems to me at this point when we look at scientific evidence and when we look at just recommendations, I think BCAs are for the most part marketing ploy. People who sell BCAs generally they say that BCAs prevent muscle breakdown, especially during fasted training. I think there is something to that, but I haven't seen any benefit to BCAs other than maybe potentially recommending it to my clients who are vegans and who train fasted. Like,
Well, I don't see any purpose in buying BCAs just because. And the question I always ask is why spend the same amount of money to buy 3 amino acids when you can spend the same amount of money to buy a product that can get all 20 amino acids, meaning like you buy a nice high quality whey protein or a hemp
yeah,
protein powder and things like that. So where,
yeah,
they're selling a 30-day supply of BCAs for 30, $40. I'm like, I can get a good quality protein powder for probably the same amount. I'll get 20 or 30 grams of protein per serving. I'll get all those amino acids plus more. So it's like, it
yeah.
makes no sense to take branch chain. Some of the research too that I am seeing now, and I haven't really, again, it's so hard to spend time reading papers anymore. But some of the research is there's some concerns about some of these branch chains or just amino acids, like particularly things like leucine. Like you want to be careful just always elevating mTOR, which mTOR is
Mhm.
basically a reaction when you take leucine. It increases mTOR signaling, that increases protein synthesis, that increases the anabolic response. But is there an impact on DNA breakdown? I don't know the answer to that. I'm not an expert in that area in genetic science, but there seems to be some concern that if you constantly elevate mTOR, there could be some impact on cancer, DNA. And again, I don't know the specifics. There's just some things I've been reading and seeing a little bit of clips on, and I got to get a better understanding of that. Now, like you said, if there's a client that's like, can't consume whey, I don't like hemp, I'm a vegan or vegetarian. Sure. I mean, that's better than getting very little amino acids from maybe the sources you're getting. But then can we get enough from food? Can we do beans and quinoa and rice and other complete proteins when you combine them together? that could potentially get them enough protein from the diet. Maybe we can, and maybe depending on their diet variety, we can't.
Yeah, and I think electrolyte supplements are going also down that route of like BCA's marketing very similarly, where people who sell them will claim that plain water and just drinking liquids will not hydrate us, period. The only way to properly hydrate the human body is through use of electrolytes, and then usually that leads into a marketing funnel to sell those supplements. I assume you did notice this latest trend of just pushing for pretty like overly expensive supplements when it comes to like electrolytes, right? The electrolyte supplements is obviously there is a use, and there is a certain time in certain scenarios where electrolytes are recommended. Specifically, like in my case, my clients who are also like recreational endurance athletes, right? They might benefit at least during their competition days. They might benefit from electrolytes, but like generally, like, do you recommend them? Obviously, you are the perfect person to talk about like differences between athletes and general population, but do you also think that like electrolyte supplementation is going like just completely just a wild path of being marketed as something that they're actually not?
Yeah, there's a lot of brands on the market. I will disclose I have my own sports and hydration powder
Hmm.
that we launched about a year and a half ago. But like you said, the average person who doesn't do a lot of movement, they don't need to be drinking these products. They don't need to add 1,000 milligrams of sodium to the water. They don't need to be consuming electrolyte packs unless they're like, hey, I'm sick of drinking water. I need something with flavor to drink more water. Then fine, add a little bit of that. But there's no need to overconsume. For the person who's losing a lot of electrolytes from a performance standpoint, soccer, football, athletes, endurance athletes, that especially as the climate gets hotter in certain places where I live in Louisiana, the humidity here is pretty awful. I go outside, I'll cut my grass for an hour and I'm soaking wet. So there's a time where you need those electrolytes. But yeah, I mean, for the
Yeah.
average consumer, they're like, oh, I'm going to consume this packet of hydration right before my workout. I'm like, why? All you're going to do is bloat your gut, with 1,000 milligrams of sodium. Maybe wait until after. There's really no benefit unless you're doing a lot of work. Water can be just fine. Most people are consuming a pretty good bit of sodium from their diet. Now,
Mm.
what we did with our product, it's called liquid fuel. We used a slow release carb. So what makes liquid fuel a little bit different is the carbohydrate we're using is called isomose maltulose palatinose. It's a low glycemic carbohydrate. It's like eating an apple. Pretty much all the carbohydrate beverages on the market is more like dextrose, maltodextrin, a mix of like sucrose and maltodextrin, which there are benefits for those, right? For the endurance athlete on a bike, they're 50 miles in or whatever, and they're tired. We need quick sugar. There's a benefit there, but for the market we're going after, slow release carbs, we feel pre, during, can help kind of keep blood sugar more stable. We also added half your daily need for magnesium. You don't see
Hmm.
magnesium in a lot of these products today. So it's not a high concentrated electrolyte to where it's like, you're sweating for 3 hours. You probably need to have something a lot higher in concentration, but it's just something we feel is better. There's no artificial ingredients. There's no dyes and colors like some of your really popular brands on the market that most people drink. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a place for them, but you really should be active. You shouldn't be like, I'm going to drink this sports drink because I've been sitting on my butt all day doing nothing. I think what we're trying to do too is there's so many young kids that I see, like at my daughter's volleyball tournament, they're drinking energy drinks and they're drinking these products they should not be consuming. There's no need. I don't think anyone should, but I mean, I'm not going to sit here and speak for adults who can make their own decisions. I definitely don't think a 13 or 14-year-old teenager should be sucking down an energy drink that has 3 or 4 stimulants, erythritol. There's just no reason for that. So we're trying to find a safe and healthy alternative for kids to where it's like, look, here's a better product. It's got really good research, from a sustainability on blood sugar. It's been well studied. The ingredient has been well studied in diabetics to keep their blood sugar very stable. So, can that translate over into the athlete to maybe help their performance? There's some
Hmm.
research that says yes, but it's just we feel it's better than what's on the market now, and we can have probably a whole podcast just on that topic in general. But looking forward to kind of speaking with you again soon too.
Yeah, man, absolutely, absolutely. And obviously, I love you, and I'm going to fully endorse anything that you do, including your product. My goal with this podcast is to really just get it into the top of the fitness podcast in the next couple of years. Obviously, I'm rusty as shit. I need to
Yeah, this is
get
great. This
back
is
into the
fun.
groove. Yeah, and it was for me as well, man. So like, Electrolytes, omega 3s, I think those alone can be separate podcast episodes,
Yep.
especially with your knowledge, with your degree of knowledge, and with your experience. And I would love to have you on again, dude.